Mario Balotelli's left the Premier League. He's one of the big personalities. What do you think that means? Do you think these days we've got a little bit of a dearth of personalities in the Premier League? Is it sad to see him go in a way, do you think?
In a way, it's sad to see him go. I don't think it's quite like losing Ronaldo in the way we did in this league a few years ago. I think we lost a huge personality in Ronaldo, but we also lost a fantastic footballer who enthralled us with the skills that he had on the football pitch. Mario hasn't done quite that. He's done half of it. He's enthralled us with his personality off the pitch, and you never know what you were quite going to read about him next, or what antics he was getting up to. But he never quite on a regular basis thrilled us in the way that he can, or the way he does occasionally. I don't know quite why. Maybe he'll feel he never got the chance to do that. But we won't miss him as much as others have done. But I never like to see, because I love this league, I never like to see big personalities leave. So it was a little sad to see him go. But, I think City fans realise that he didn't contribute enough, regularly enough, where it matters most for football fans, and that's on the pitch.
Do you think it's become more difficult now, Andy, with the sort of the attention that we get, the way that everything's covered and looked at through a microscope, for someone with a big personality to thrive, really? Is it almost as if they have to just put that away and just keep their life very narrow these days?
Oh, no, I think you can have a personality and still survive in this league. But it's what you do with that personality. With Mario, I mean, some of the antics he got up to, setting fireworks off his roof in his apartment in the middle of Manchester, different things like that. They're not quite the antics of a normal personality. I think it's what you do with it. I think there's still room. I hope there's still room for personality as well as great footballers in this league, because that would sadden me. That we were turning into a bunch of clones, and that we weren't allowing our footballers to show us what their personality really was. That would frighten me, and I wouldn't like that.
Yeah, because I guess when you were playing, Andy, it was more there was more freedom. Would you say that there wasn't this kind of if you went out on the town, there wasn't always someone trailing you and watching you drink every beer that you had?
No, that's true. I think today that's the one thing that I don't envy the modern footballer. The fact that every time he steps out of his home, whether it's with his wife, his girlfriend, his mates, and he goes to a restaurant or a bar or whatever, or a nightclub, he is risking someone. It's not always the press. It could be a member of the public with mobile phones, with all the devices that we have today to record video, to record pictures. It's become very much a place where he has to be very careful where he goes. But that's the responsibility that they have now. They're getting paid huge amounts of money. And by getting paid huge amounts of money, they have to behave a little bit more responsibly.
On the theme of money then, Andy, move topics just slightly. Your old club, Aston Villa, struggling this season. I mean, it must sadden you to see what's going on there. Do you think this season, with the huge money that's coming in, and obviously football's already a huge money game, but this big new TV deal, is this possibly the worst season of them all to get relegated from the Premier League, do you think? We're
seeing that. We can see that with the panic that's around certain football clubs. And when I say panic, maybe that's too strong a word, but certainly Newcastle were concerned about their form, and therefore they went out and bought 4 or 5 players and spent over £20 million doing so, because there was a concern there. QPR obviously have been concerned since day one. They've very rarely been off the foot of the table. They desperately want to protect their Premier League status, and every club is like that. Aston Villa have been in the big league for, I think it's 25, 35 consecutive years. And the last thing that they need now is to lose out on the huge money that is going to come every Premier League side's way at the beginning of next season. It is the worst season in the world to be relegated. You're absolutely right, and that's why it's going to be so difficult to survive, and teams will be giving everything to try to make sure that they don't get relegated. And it's tough. I think there are 5 teams who are going to fight it out unless someone drops in. Unless a Norwich, whose form's not been great recently, unless a Norwich drop into the pack and amongst the guys, then I think there's 5 teams, Southampton, Reading, Wigan, Villa and QPR, who are going to certainly battle it out. And maybe, as I say, maybe a Norwich or a Fulham, whose both their forms have not been great. If they don't get a result soon, you could see them dropping into it. But I think that apart, you've got 5 teams who are desperate to survive, and only 2 of them will.
Do you think Villa are good enough, Andy? I mean, they had a very good performance against another one of your old teams at the weekend. And obviously, everyone's always trying to look. We're always trying to look for blame in these situations. So, is it the manager? Is it the owner, who we don't really see? I mean, a guy who sold his American sports franchise for $1 billion last year. Where do you see the blame, or do you think it's just a case of they've just fallen behind and they're just not good enough? I mean, how do you see it?
I think blame's easy to apportion depending on where you sit. I think everyone's culpable at Villa, from top to bottom. I think that Randy will tell you he gave over £22 million to Paul Lambert at the beginning of the season, therefore that should be enough. Paul will tell you he spent that money and brought players in, albeit some young players that haven't quite worked out the way he would, so there has to be, and he sets the tactics and he picks the teams, so there has to be some culpability there. And then of course the players, who I don't think are doing enough at times. And I think that have been shown that in certain games they're mentally not as strong as they need to be. I think there's definitely a mental weakness on this side at the moment. They've got some good players. We've seen it at Anfield when they won 3-1. We saw it for an hour at Goodison at the weekend when they were 3-1 up again. But we've also seen them go and play Bradford City and play poorly and lose 8-0 at Stamford Bridge. You know, you don't lose 8-0 if you've got a bit of mental strength and a bit of pride about you. That just doesn't happen if you're a proper side. So I think everyone is partially to blame at Villa for the way where they sit at the moment. And the only way they're going to get out of it is if everyone who is to blame gets together and works tremendously hard from now until the end of May to preserve the status. They're not out of it. They've got a great chance of surviving, Aston Villa. The one thing I would say is that recent games, they've looked like they can get goals. But sadly, they look like they concede every time somebody goes and attacks them. And when they get a lead, whether it's a goal or 2-goal lead, you're never sure that Villa are going to hold on to it. And they have to do that quickly. If they keep losing leads in the way that they've done, then I can only see confidence getting lower and lower and lower. And then they might struggle. They need to get a victory. They need to get it soon. They've got West Ham next weekend at Villa Park. It's a wonderful opportunity for Paul and his players to go out there, get 3 points, and make a statement.
Yeah, and they need to keep Benteke fit, right? He's an impressive player. What have you thought of him so far this season?
I think what I've seen of him is a raw talent. He's a young man. He's a Belgian international, though he's young, but he's a raw talent. He's a little hit and miss at the moment, but I would expect that in someone so young. But when Villa get him in the game and keep him in the game for long periods, Villa look a better side. So therefore, it makes sense, and it's not rocket science. Keep him fit, keep him on the pitch. And at all times, if you can, get the ball to him. And never mind if you have to knock it fairly long to get him in the game, do so. This is not a time for playing pretty football and losing. It's a time for playing effective football. And it's a time for getting results. And Villa will be better prepared to get results, or better set to get results, if they have Christian Benteke on the pitch and involved in the game as much as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. Last topic I want to touch on, Andy, before I let you go, is David Beckham and the fact that he still managed at 37 to be the biggest story on transfer deadline day. Yeah. How did you take that one in? Because is it just a publicity stunt? Should we just see it as that and say, okay, fair enough? Or do you think there is still enough of a player there that the ridiculous, it seems to me a sort of bizarre notion that he might return to play for England. Is that ridiculous, or is there an element of truth in that? Could that happen? Should that happen?
Well, one thing, in answer to will he play for England again, absolutely categorically not. No way would Roy Hodgson pick David Beckham to play for England at 37 years of age. It would be a backward step. It would serve no purpose whatsoever for David or for England. So that won't happen. I'm not surprised he's gone to PSG. I think that David will tell you that there were maybe 5 or 6 other areas he could have gone to, clubs, Premier League clubs. I think the majority of those Premier League clubs would be bottom half of the league and would be clubs that might be struggling. At 37 years of age, you don't want to walk into a side that's struggling and have to, really exert yourself. I think David's joined a club that's moving itself forward, that wants to elevate itself, it wants to increase its profile. And I think that PSG are doing that by signing David for 4 months. I think it will serve both of them. It doesn't do David any harm. He'll be involved in a side that's growing, that's playing Champions League football, and a beautiful city, not far from London. So there's a lot of pluses for David to go there, and there are, of course, massive pluses for the Qatari owners to want David at that club. It lifts the profile. I mean, the papers have been full of it in England and France, I'm sure, in the last week. And I think that the Qatari owners want that from PSG. I think he'll play a little part, but not much. They've got some fabulous footballers, and it's difficult to see who they'd leave out for David to play regularly. But I think he will be used as a substitute. He will play maybe certain games against the clubs at the lower part of the league. But I think in the big games that matter, David won't start. So I think it's a little deal that doesn't do either of them. It doesn't do PSG any harm, and it doesn't do David any harm. And both, I think, will feel they will benefit from the relationship.